Hello, my name is Kelsey, and welcome to Ethics. In this presentation, I'll be analyzing the Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal throughout an ethical lens. So I'll walk through what happened, the ethical issues involved, how different ethical theories interpret the case, who the stakeholders were, what experts have said, and what Volkswagen could have done differently to prevent this crisis. So let's dive into the ethical issue overview. So Volkswagen's Dieselgate scandal began when the company installed software known as defeat devices in millions of diesel vehicles. So these devices detected when the car was undergoing emission testing and temporarily reduced emissions to legal levels. But during normal driving, the cars emitted up to 40 times the legal limit of nitrogen oxides. So this was uncovered in 2015 after independent researchers found major discrepancies between the lab results and the world emissions. The core ethical issues in this case revolve around deception, environmental harm, and a breakdown of corporate integrity. So, Volkswagen misled regulators, consumers, and the public. The excess emissions contributed to environmental damage and public health risks. Internally, the scandal revealed a culture where meeting performance targets was valued more than honesty or compliance. So, these issues collectively represent a major failure of ethical leadership and corporate responsibility. From a utilitarian perspective, which focuses on the greatest good for the greatest number, Volkswagen's actions were clearly unethical. While the company gained short-term benefits like increased sales and market share, the long-term harm was far greater. So the scandal damaged public health, it harmed the environment, it misled the consumers, and ultimately it cost the company like billions of dollars. So the overall consequences were overwhelmingly negative. Through the lens of virtue ethics, which emphasizes character and moral values, Volkswagen's behavior also fails the company's actions violated the core virtues such as honesty, integrity, and responsibility. The scandal revealed a culture where unethical shortcuts were normalized. So, virtue ethics would argue that even if the deception had never been discovered, it would still be wrong because it contradicts the moral character expected of just any responsible organization. From a justice and fairness standpoint, Volkswagen's actions created an unfair distribution of harm and benefits. Consumers paid for clean diesel vehicles that were not actually clean. So, competitors who followed emission rules were placed at a disadvantage. Communities and the environment absorbed the negative effects of pollution. This approach clearly shows that Volkswagen's actions were unjust and unethical. The Dieselgate scandal affected a wide range of stakeholders. So, consumers were misled by false advertising, regulators were deceived by manipulated emission tests, employees faced job insecurity and reputational damage, communities were exposed to harmful pollutants, shareholders experienced major financial losses, competitors were unfairly disadvantaged, and the environment suffered significant harm. This case demonstrates how unethical decisions can ripple across the entire ecosystem of stakeholders. So let's dive into some expert opinions. So, experts across industries have described Dieselgate as one of the most significant corporate ethics failures in recent history. Business scholars point to a toxic corporate culture and a lack of effective oversight. Industry analysts highlight Volkswagen's unrealistic performance goals as a major contributor, and journalists and investigators have emphasized how systemic the deception was, involving multiple layers of leadership. And overall, experts agree that this was not a single mistake, but it was a structural, ethical breakdown. Let's talk about the timeline. The timeline of Dieselgate shows how the problem escalated over nearly a decade. So, around 2006, engineers realized that Volkswagen's diesel engines couldn't meet the US emission standards. And then in 2008, the company made the decision to install defeat devices. And then in 2014, researchers at West Virginia University uncovered major discrepancies. And then in 2015, the EPA issued a violation notice, and Volkswagen admitted to the deception. Over the next several years, the company faced fines and lawsuits and criminal charges, and each point in this timeline represents a missed opportunity to correct the course. So they had opportunities over this decade that they didn't respond. It's difficult to argue that Volkswagen's actions were ethical. The only possible argument comes from a narrow shareholder value perspective, where short-term profits and competitive advantage might seem beneficial. But even from that standpoint, the long-term consequences were just devastating. When evaluated through any broader ethical framework, um, utilitarianism, virtue ethics, or justice, the actions were just clearly just very unethical. Looking back, what advice would have prevented this? So, several actions could have prevented this crisis. Volkswagen needed stronger internal controls and just a culture that encouraged employees to speak up. Incentives should have rewarded ethical behavior, not just performance metrics. So, leadership should have set realistic goals and emphasized compliance. Independent audits and transparent emissions reporting also could have caught problems early, but ultimately the company needed a culture where doing the right thing mattered more than meeting just their aggressive targets. So, what lessons did we learn? Well, the Dieselgate scandal teaches us that ethics must be embedded into a company's culture, not treated as just a box checking exercise or a pencil whip. Leadership plays a critical role in setting these expectations. Shortcuts may create temporary gains, but they often lead to just long term damage. I think transparency, accountability, and just strong governance are essential for maintaining trust with the stakeholders. So, those are just a few lessons learned on this. So to conclude, Volkswagen's scandal is just a powerful example of how ethical failures can escalate into global crises. By examining the case through multiple ethical frameworks, we can see how deeply the company's actions violated core principles. The lessons from this case highlighted the importance of ethical leadership, responsible decision making, and a culture that truly prioritizes integrity. And to wrap things up, this is the last slide, but here are the references for the sources that were used throughout this presentation. Thank you so much for listening.